When you start playing Outer Wilds, you wake up in a cozy little village on your first day as part of the Outer Wilds ventures, and in the 30 or so minutes you'll probably spend here, you'll get a sense of what this game is about. A feel for the two driving themes that carry through from beginning to end. A love for space and exploration, but also a sense of community. It's a wonderful starting point with great environmental storytelling. There's the sign for the Outer Wilds Ventures, a massive observatory high above the village and a launch pad waiting for its newest pilot. But also campfires, marshmallows, folks sitting around in chairs and children wanting to play hide and seek. Two very different worlds completely intertwined, and by starting you in this location and keeping you here with small side games and optional tutorials, this is what Outer Wilds wants you to be a part of. And when you finally get your launch codes and head for your ship, you'll start to understand why. The first section of the game narrows down the scope before exploding it into what will turn out to be the most exciting, dynamic, beautiful, evocative open world that you've probably ever played. When you leave Timber Hearth for the first time, you can go anywhere. Any planet you see can be the first step of your adventure, and you can't really make a bad choice. The worlds are not only incredible and exciting, filled with details to explore, sights to just gaze at, and puzzles to solve to delve further into the figurative and sometimes literal depths that these planets have to offer, but they're also all vastly different. The oceans of Giant's Deep aren't like the red rock of Ember Twin, and the twisting void of the Dark Bramble isn't like, well, anything. This is how you do an open world. Outer Wilds offers complete non-linearity from the moment you first take off, and it's on you to figure out what you can do and what you can find, and there is so much to find. It continually feels different. The worlds are unorthodox and creative. Every planet you reach is powerful, but in a totally new way. The only thing that they share is that the emotions you experience while exploring them are visceral. This is a game where you will feel awe, wonder, excitement, fear, but also sadness or melancholy. Thinking back on the number of jaw-dropping moments in Outer Wilds, it seems almost impossible that they could have all come from just one game. One reason that the developers could fit so much into this small open world is the premise. The Outer Wilds is set in a time loop. That's not a spoiler, it's the premise of the game. It's a mystery about a solar system trapped in an endless time loop. 22 minutes after waking up, the star you're orbiting will explode. If you haven't suffocated, burned, fallen, or chosen to meditate, then wherever you are, whatever you're doing, after 22 minutes, this timeline will end in a bright blue blaze. And this holds the key to why the planets of the Outer Wilds are so spectacular, because a game world can't normally be this dynamic. The nature of the planets causes them to change over time, sometimes in really significant ways. You can't have major fundamental changes to the environment like this in a normal game, because the player has to witness the before, during, and after to have any appreciation of it. But that's not a problem when you're in a time loop. The past is going to happen again, and so you can always witness the full cycle of changes take place. Normally, to have any sort of changes on this scale, you would have to let the player dictate when it happens. You can waste days on whatever side quest you like, and yet you arrive just in time for the city to fall or for the war to begin, and it never really feels natural. I think a good marker for the strength of an open world is when you feel like even if you stopped playing, the world would carry on existing around you, and that couldn't be more true in the Outer Wilds. Just because you can't see it, it won't stop sands from falling or ice from melting. Dynamic is the way to explain the world of Outer Wilds. Just looking out at the solar system, the first thing that hits you is the movement. All the planets orbiting the sun or orbiting each other, the ellipse of a comet cutting across them all, and it's a sight to behold just floating in your ship and watching everything move through the vast emptiness of the space around them. It's one of the areas where Mobius Digital have aimed for a realism in the physics of the game. Not a true realism, but a gamified one that plucks details a player will notice. It's a game about space exploration, a supernova, grand research. It's all science, and there was a passion for this theme at Mobius Digital that you can feel as you play. In the ship's thruster-based controls, in the orbit of the planet, in the scientific ideas related to quantum mechanics woven lightly through the story, and in the technologies of the past civilizations you explore that come from the best of science fiction. Even the home planet you start the game on houses a small village with a handful of campfires, but an observatory and an astronaut training program. None of it is truly scientific, none of it is overly complex, but I've always said that when a game has a clear passion for something, it will come through in the gameplay and the story. And the way the Outer Wilds tells a story is incredible. At no point in the game are you given a mission. You're never told where to go. Of course, there are locations the game wants you to visit, secrets the game wants you to find, but your goals as a player are only defined by what you know and what you want to do. It's a game that inspires you to have an intrinsic motivation to keep playing. It reminds me in a lot of ways of Heaven's Vault in how the story is non-linear, player-driven, and draws you completely into it. You have freedom to explore anywhere, and when you do, you'll find hints and clues and inscriptions that can lead you to new places, or give you more information about the history of where you are. Information you learn on one planet could be exactly what you needed to figure out the mystery on another one. Your ship's computer helps here. It's the game's only real permanent progress, spinning out a web of markers as you discover key information and how it all links together. But it's when you start linking the information together for yourself that the magic really happens. You have to piece together a history on the information that you found, filling in the gaps with your imagination and your reasoning, and this was a big similarity with Heaven's Vault that I loved. Every time I found a new location or a new scroll, I'd uncover something I'd not known before, and in just a few dozen words I'd be re-evaluating the whole world, imagining a brand new sequence of events and what the consequences of that were. Every time you find somewhere in the Outer Wilds, it doesn't just answer a question, it gives you a new one. You are an active participant in the story, something that nowhere near enough video games truly do. And so even though it is the classic video game technique of putting some writing on walls and in a handful of computer logs, it ends up being so much more impactful. These pieces of text that you read are often vital clues for guiding yourself to other interesting parts of the solar system, but one of the other tools you'll use is sound. The sound design of Outer Wilds is superb, and the soundtrack itself is almost perfect. The music that marks the start of the supernova and the main title theme quickly became two of my favourite pieces of video game music, but the sound has a gameplay use as well. Your signal scope can follow the mysterious whale of quantum structures, track down the detectable signals still being emitted by ancient technology, and hear the sound of instruments. A banjo, a harmonica, a flute, drums. The sounds of the other members of the Outer Wilds ventures, each playing their own part of a hauntingly beautiful melody out into the reaches of space. As grand and spectacular as the ideas and the worlds are, Outer Wilds is also very human. It's a game that never fails, whether through the music across the signal scope, finding a fellow Hearthian at a campfire, or learning about the individuals that used to inhabit this star system. It never fails to have you feeling empathetic. The stories you uncover are about impressive schemes and grand events, but almost always told through individuals. It's these two distinct planes that the Outer Wilds lives on. Every loop you start by staring at an enormous planet in the sky in a brilliant flash of blue, and then you look down at a campfire ready to roast marshmallows on. I wish I could say that everything was perfect, but that wouldn't be true, and Outer Wilds does have its issues. The free, open-ended exploration with no hand-holding is phenomenal, until you're not sure what to do next. There was a point towards the end of the game where there were now fewer and fewer things to find, and I've seen this part of the game likened to Dark Souls, where you're trying to figure out one thing and you're dying over and over, only making tiny incremental progress towards it. The fourth dimension that allowed the game world to feel so alive now also makes it harder to pin things down. You don't just have to know where something is, you might also have to know when it is as well. And so there were a handful of tiny things that added a huge amount of time to my playthrough of the game. I thought an object I could interact with was part of the background. I missed a small object in a large dark room. I didn't see a ledge in a smaller dark room. I missed a jump twice. I went into an entrance and out of a different entrance and missed something along the way. And I did something very tricky, very carefully, and the star exploded before I finished. And other than missing that same jump a second time, none of these things felt particularly stupid. But in a 15 to 20 hour game, the amount of time they added was actually quite significant, and a lot of that time wasn't really fun. Almost all of this happened in one chunk towards the end of the game, but I wouldn't let that put you off. And if you play Outer Wilds and hit this stage, you should revisit your log, really think about what to do next, and just try to push through, because it is definitely worth it. Even with an hour or two of playing the Outer Wilds that I didn't really enjoy, there just isn't an experience that comes even close to offering what this does here. There was a moment quite early on when I was playing and I landed on a comet. As I got out of my ship to explore, the gravity of the sun pulled it from the surface of this tiny rock, and I was scared. I felt completely alone, stranded in space with no means of ever returning home, even though that made no sense at all. In 22 minutes, I was going to blow up. I'd wake up back on Timber Hearth. I would end up home anyway. But it didn't feel like it at the time, and it's a testament to how immersive this world is and how it completely captures your imagination that I still had that feeling. Outer Wilds is simply one of the most remarkable games you will ever play. The first dozen hours are simply unlike anything else, and even with the blip towards the game's second half, it is still a monumental achievement. The beauty of its worlds, the impeccable sound design, the roller coaster of emotions, and incredible sprawling storytelling. But I don't know if I'll ever be able to play the Outer Wilds again. At least not for a very long time. With how it relies on discovery and information, it's not a game that lends itself to replayability. I'm someone who replays all their favourite games, I reread my favourite books, I rewatch my favourite movies, often more than I do new ones. But even with just a single playthrough, the Outer Wilds is not something I'm ever likely to forget. And ultimately, when it ended and I put the controller down, I just felt happy to have been a part of it.